They said Mercy Hill Hospital closed because of budget cuts. But the truth? It shut down because babies were disappearing. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. The city was still half asleep when the first ambulance screamed down Roosevelt Road, slicing through the orange haze that rose from manhole grates and the exhaust of buses warming for their morning routes. Chicago in 1983 was a city of hard edges softened only by the lake wind, a city that hid its secrets in old buildings and the quiet transactions of men who preferred not to be seen. On the south side, the Mercy Hill Medical Center hunched against the cold like a weary sentinel. The red brick was darkened by decades of soot and neglect, its windows streaked with rain and the residue of 1,000 storms. To most, it was a hospital like any other, short on funds, long on need. But inside, past the nurse's station and the humming fluorescent lights, something was wrong. In the maternity ward, Nurse Clara Jeffries adjusted her mask and checked the clipboard hanging at the end of an empty crib. The baby's name had been erased, not crossed out, but cleanly lifted with correction fluid. Clara frowned. The forms had been filled out the night before. A young mother, 17, had delivered a boy after 16 hours of labor. The mother's name, Janine Carter. Clara flipped the sheet back over. The baby's chart was missing from the folder. That wasn't unusual. Papers vanished here more often than they should. But something about the silence in the nursery unsettled her. Usually, by 7 a.m., the floor hummed with life. The beeping of monitors, the thin cries of newborns, the chatter of nurses. This morning, there was only the low throb of the radiator and the sound of her own breathing. She turned toward the window. Snow was starting to fall, thin, dry flakes like ash. Down the hall, Dr. Alan Greaves was finishing his rounds. A thin man with a precise manner, Greaves had the air of someone perpetually tired but unwilling to show it. He had joined Mercy Hill 10 years earlier, drawn by a promise of autonomy and research funding that had long since evaporated. What kept him there now? Even he couldn't say. Habit, perhaps, or guilt. When he entered the records room, he found Sister Margaret, the hospital administrator, waiting for him. Her hands were folded neatly over a manila envelope. "Doctor," she said, her tone clipped, "we need to discuss last night's incident." He raised an eyebrow. "Which incident?" "The Carter girl. The mother signed the discharge papers early this morning." "That's impossible," Greaves said. "She lost too much blood. She couldn't have walked out of here." "She didn't walk," Sister Margaret said quietly. "Two men came for her." The words hung there, heavy. "Who authorized that?" "The paperwork was signed by the board. Everything is accounted for." She handed him the envelope. "You'll want to read this." Greaves hesitated before taking it. He'd been in enough board meetings to know how things were accounted for. Numbers shifted. Files disappeared. Lives were written out of ledgers. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Raymond Voss sat in his unmarked car outside a rundown diner near 63rd Street, sipping burnt coffee and scanning the front page of the Tribune. A small story buried on page 6 caught his eye. Unidentified infant found in abandoned lot. No photo, no follow-up, just a few lines about a body discovered in the cold. Voss frowned. It was the third report like it in as many months. He'd grown up in neighborhoods like this, where people disappeared without questions. But something about the pattern gnawed at him. The babies were always newborns, always unclaimed. Hospitals wrote them off as paperwork errors, lost adoptions, clerical mix-ups. But Voss knew better. In Chicago, nothing went missing without someone getting paid. Back at Mercy Hill, Clara Jeffries stood at the end of Janine Carter's empty bed. The sheets had been stripped, the 4-pole removed, the room sanitized as if she had never existed. She opened her mouth to call the nurse's station, and stopped when she saw the photograph lying on the floor. It was small, almost creased in half, a Polaroid of a newborn swaddled in blue, taken against the faded wallpaper of the maternity wing. Someone had written a number on the back in smudged ink, #47B. Clara slipped it into her pocket before anyone could see. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Somewhere below, in the basement where few staff ever went, a door opened and closed with a hollow clang. In that basement, under flickering bulbs, a man in a tan overcoat carried a small box wrapped in hospital linens. His name was Frank Daly, though the name on his badge wasn't his own. He wasn't supposed to be there, but then again, he never was. He worked in transportation, a euphemism that covered many sins: disposal, delivery, disappearance. Daly checked his watch. The van would be waiting behind the service entrance in 5 minutes. He set the box on a gurney, peeled back the blanket just enough to glimpse a tiny hand, and then quickly covered it again. He didn't look back as he wheeled the gurney down the hall. Upstairs, Sister Margaret stood before a crucifix in her office, whispering a prayer that had long since lost its meaning. And somewhere in the city, the first snowstorm of the season began to fall, covering everything, the streets, the alleys, and the secrets, in a clean white silence. Detective Raymond Voss didn't like hospitals. The air was too clean, too sterile, masking the rot he knew lay beneath. Mercy Hill was no different. Its lobby was lined with wilted plants and tired faces, the kind of place where hope felt rationed. He flashed his badge at the front desk, though the clerk didn't look up from her forms. "Detective Voss, I need to speak with whoever's in charge of patient records." "Records is in the basement," she said, monotone. "But you'll need clearance." "I've got it." He didn't. But the clerk wasn't paid enough to argue. The elevator creaked on its way down. The basement smelled of bleach and old paper. Rows of metal cabinets lined the walls, each tagged with years: 1978, 1979, 1980. Files bulged from every drawer. The hum of a distant generator filled the silence. He pulled one drawer open: Births, 1983. The folders were arranged alphabetically, but gaps punctuated the line of names like missing teeth. Carter, Janine should have been there. It wasn't. He checked the next drawer. Nothing. Looking for something? The voice startled him. He turned. A nurse stood by the door, mid-30s, sharp eyes above her mask. "Detective Voss," he said. "And you are?" "Clara Jeffries. I work upstairs." She hesitated before stepping closer. "You're not the first to come asking about missing babies." He studied her. "You know something?" "I know that one of my patients, Janine Carter, was here 2 nights ago. She's gone now. And so is her baby." Voss's jaw tightened. "Did she sign discharge papers?" "She couldn't have. She was barely conscious when they took her." "They?" Clara looked toward the corridor as if someone might be listening. 2 men, wearing hospital badges I've never seen before. They said they were from social services, but... She stopped. "You learn to tell when someone doesn't belong." Voss nodded slowly. "I'll need names, dates, anything you can give me." She reached into her pocket and handed him a Polaroid. The baby's face was small, eyes closed, wrapped in blue. On the back, #47B. "Found it under her bed," Clara said. "I don't know what the number means, but there are more. I've seen charts with the same kind of code." Voss slipped the photo into his coat. "Keep this quiet. Don't tell anyone we spoke." She gave a short, nervous laugh. "If I don't tell anyone, maybe I'll still have a job tomorrow." He was halfway to the elevator when he saw a man in a tan overcoat turn the corner, moving quickly, head down, pushing an empty gurney. Their eyes met for half a second. Voss caught a flash of something on his badge. Facilities Transport. "Hey!" he called, but the man was already gone. That night, Voss sat at his kitchen table, the Polaroid under a desk lamp. He'd seen trafficking rings before, drugs, weapons, even organs, but this was different. There was a system here, neat and deliberate. Someone was moving infants out of hospitals under paperwork that looked clean. He spread the reports in front of him. 3 infants found in the last 4 months, all unidentified. 2 from the south side, 1 near the Indiana border. Each had been reported as stillborn in a hospital file, but none had been buried properly. His phone rang. It was his partner, Detective Lena Ortiz. "Ray, you're still working that ghost case? Something's off at Mercy Hill. Missing babies, missing mothers, and somebody's paying to keep it quiet. You've got proof." "Not yet." "Then don't say it out loud," Ortiz warned. "You start talking baby trafficking and they'll bury your badge before you can blink." Voss leaned back, the old ceiling fan spinning above him. "I'm already half buried." At Mercy Hill, Clara couldn't sleep. The faces of the mothers came back to her in fragments. The girls too young to understand the forms they were signing, the quiet sobbing behind drawn curtains. She pulled an old file from her drawer, one she'd kept against hospital policy. "Patient, Denise Miller, 1981. The details were the same. Premature labor, infant listed as non-viable, mother discharged without consent. Denise had come back weeks later, begging for answers. Then she'd stopped coming altogether. Clara set the file aside, trembling. The phone rang, a voice she didn't recognize. "You've been asking about the Carter case," the voice said. Male, calm, measured. "That's a mistake. Who is this?" "Stop looking, Nurse Jeffries. You don't want to end up like the others." The line went dead. She sat there for a long time, staring at the receiver. Then she grabbed her coat. 2 nights later, Voss followed a lead from an informant, a janitor who worked part-time at the hospital. The man met him behind a laundromat on 59th, nervous and chain-smoking. "They move them out through the morgue," he said. "At night. Unmarked vans. Always the same driver. The paperwork says disposal, but those boxes ain't empty. Who signs the orders? I don't know names, but they wear crosses, the kind the sisters wear." Voss felt the cold settle in his stomach. "The nuns." "Not just them," the janitor whispered. "There's someone bigger. A man. Comes from downtown every month, checks the records, signs off on payments. Nobody knows his name, but they call him the broker." Clara sat in the chapel, the lights dim, the crucifix casting a long shadow across the pews. Sister Margaret entered quietly, her shoes clicking against the tile. "You've been troubled lately," the sister said. "I can see it." Clara looked up. "How do you live with it?" "With what, child?" "The lies. The babies that disappear. The mothers we tell to forget." Sister Margaret's face softened, almost kindly. "You think I don't ask myself the same thing every night? Then stop it." The sister's voice turned sharp. "You don't understand what we're preserving here. There are families, real families, who can give those children lives we can't. By stealing them? By saving them," she said, and for a moment Clara saw something fierce and desperate in her eyes. "The world has never been kind to certain children. We give them a way out. Clara stood. You're lying to yourself. Maybe, Sister Margaret said, but you'd be wise not to go digging where graves are still fresh. Outside, snow was falling again. A van idled near the loading dock, exhaust curling into the dark. Frank Daly lifted another linen-wrapped bundle into the back, careful not to look too long. From a window above, Clara watched, and in the same moment, Detective Voss parked across the street, camera in hand, waiting for the shutter's sound to cut the silence. One flash in the night, and the web began to unravel. The photo developed slowly in the red glow of Voss's darkroom. A van, a man in a tan coat, a hospital logo blurred by motion. Enough to prove something was moving under Mercy Hill's name, not enough to bring it down. He pinned the print beside others on the wall, babies marked stillborn, falsified death certificates, transfers signed by Sister Margaret. Each thread led back to one place, a private adoption agency on the north side, New Beginnings Family Services. Meanwhile, Clara met Voss in a diner on Wabash. She kept glancing at the door. "They're changing shifts in the records office," she whispered. "Files are being shredded. Whole boxes." Voss slid her a folded note. "Don't go back there tonight. You're on their radar." She nodded, though her eyes said she wouldn't listen. That same night, Sister Margaret met the broker in her office. He wore a dark suit, hands gloved even indoors. "You're drawing attention," he said evenly. "The detective, the nurse, their liabilities." Margaret's composure faltered. "We're helping children." "You're running a business," he interrupted, "and business requires silence." He left a white envelope on her desk. "Take care of it." She stared at it long after he was gone, the hum of the radiator filling the room. Clara returned to the hospital after midnight. The corridors were quiet, lights dimmed. She slipped into records and opened the shred bin. Inside, half-torn pages, patient names, birth codes. One fragment caught her breath. #47B. Transfer. New Beginnings, February 12th. She pocketed it, turned, and froze. Frank Daly stood in the doorway. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. Clara's voice trembled. "You're part of this." He hesitated. "I just move boxes. I don't ask what's in them." Then start asking. Outside, sirens wailed. Distant, approaching. Voss's radio crackled. Disturbance reported, Mercy Hill basement. He hit the gas. Inside, alarms began to flash red. Clara and Frank ran for the stairwell as Sister Margaret watched from her office window, the envelope still unopened on her desk. For the first time, she looked afraid. The alarms still echoed through Mercy Hill when Detective Voss pushed through the front doors, badge in one hand, gun in the other. The lobby was nearly empty, only a night clerk cowering behind the counter and the hum of emergency lights spinning red across the walls. He took the stairs two at a time toward the basement. The smell of antiseptic mixed with smoke. Somewhere, a fuse had blown. At the bottom, he saw a door marked records, authorized personnel only. It hung open. Inside, papers littered the floor, and a shredder still whined uselessly, jammed with the remnants of birth certificates. Then he heard voices. "Wait!" Clara's shout. "You don't have to do this." Voss followed the sound through a corridor to the loading bay. There, Clara stood against the wall, and Frank Daly faced her, one hand raised, torn between guilt and duty. A small box lay between them on the floor. "Step back, both of you," Voss barked. Daly froze. "You don't understand, Detective. You don't want to get mixed up in this." "I'm already in it," Voss said. Open the box. Daly hesitated, then slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of papers, adoption records, notarized and sealed. Dozens of them. They're real, Daly said. They've been sending these to agencies all over the country. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Those are the babies. Before Voss could answer, heavy footsteps echoed behind them. Sister Margaret appeared, flanked by 2 hospital guards. Her face was pale, her voice trembling between fury and despair. "Detective," she said, "you're trespassing on private property." "You're running an illegal adoption ring," Voss replied. "That's a crime scene." "You think you can save them?" she snapped. "Those children would have been forgotten. We gave them a chance." Voss stepped forward. "You sold them." The guards moved. Voss raised his weapon. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Sister Margaret's hand lifted, hesitant, shaking, and she said quietly, "Enough. Let them go." Daly exhaled, dropping his shoulders. Clara stared at her in disbelief. Margaret looked at Voss, her eyes hollow. "You have no idea how deep this goes." "I'll find out," he said. An hour later, the hospital was sealed off. Squad cars lined the block, lights pulsing through the snow. Clara sat in the back of an ambulance, blanket around her shoulders. Voss approached, handing her a cup of coffee. "You did the right thing," he said. She nodded faintly. "It doesn't feel like it." "It will." From across the lot, Sister Margaret was led to a patrol car. She didn't resist. The snow fell heavier now, clinging to her veil as she turned her eyes toward the hospital's glowing windows, toward all she had justified in the name of mercy. Inside, officers boxed evidence from the basement, shredded files, falsified certificates, and a single photograph marked #47B. Voss watched as it disappeared into a folder, the faint outline of a baby's face vanishing beneath official seals and signatures. He wondered how many others were still out there, and who, above them all, was still pulling the strings. The morning after the raid, Chicago woke to headlines that barely scratched the truth. Hospital under investigation for adoption irregularities. No mention of Mercy Hill's name, no mention of missing mothers or numbered babies. Just a few careful sentences buried under mayoral budget news. Detective Voss sat in his car outside the Tribune offices, the paper folded on the dash, coffee gone cold. He had sent everything, photos, files, statements, but only fragments made print. Someone higher up was trimming the story. Someone powerful. He dialed his partner. "Ortiz. They're burying it." "I told you they would," she said. "You're talking about money, not morals. That trail runs straight through the city. Then we dig." He started the engine. At Mercy Hill, the hallways felt like a ghost town. Patients had been moved, staff reassigned or silent. The maternity ward was locked, blinds drawn. Clara had been suspended pending review. She sat at home in her small apartment off Halstead, staring at the stack of files she'd hidden before the raid. Copies, photographs, scraps of what was left. She turned one over. A logo she hadn't noticed before. New Beginnings Family Services, embossed faintly in gold. She whispered the name aloud, as if saying it might summon danger. Downtown, the broker sat behind a glass desk on the 27th floor of a high-rise overlooking the river. He read the morning paper without expression. When his assistant entered, he simply said, "It's contained." "Yes, sir. The sister's been charged. No mention of your name." "Good." He folded the paper carefully. "Then we continue, but quieter." Voss found the agency 2 days later, a modest brick building with a blue awning, sandwiched between a law office and a florist. The sign read New Beginnings Family Services, ISTI 1979. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and perfume. Behind the desk sat a woman with pearl earrings and a practiced smile. "Detective Voss. I'm with CPD. I'd like to ask about your adoption process." "Of course," she said sweetly, offering coffee. "We're proud of our transparency." Her nameplate read Elaine Porter, Director. Voss noticed a photo behind her, a man in a dark suit, shaking hands with a city councilman. The same face blurred in one of the hospital surveillance stills. The broker. "Is this your husband?" he asked. Elaine's smile thinned. "A benefactor." "Why?" Voss leaned forward. "Because I think he's been buying babies." The smile vanished entirely. That night, Clara received an unmarked envelope slid under her door. Inside, a single photograph, her standing beside Detective Voss at the diner. On the back, written in neat block letters, "Stop helping him." Her hands shook. She looked out the window, but the street below was empty. She picked up the phone, dialed Voss. "They're watching us," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But we're close." She exhaled. "Then we can't stop now." Outside, snow began again, soft, relentless, the kind that swallowed sirens and secrets alike. The storm that rolled in that night turned the city silver and silent. Streetlights blurred through falling snow as Detective Voss drove north along the river, headlights cutting a thin line through the dark. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was tailing him. In the mirror, 2 cars back, a pair of headlights stayed perfectly steady, never gaining, never fading. He slowed. They slowed. He turned onto Kinsey. They turned too. At the next intersection, he killed his lights, ducked into an alley, and waited. The car rolled past, a dark Lincoln with tinted windows. No plates. He reached for his radio, then stopped. It wasn't time to call it in. Not yet. At her apartment, Clara spread the stolen files across her kitchen table. Each one carried the same faint watermark, NBFS Confidential. She'd pieced together a timeline, transfers, payments, false death certificates, all signed by one man, Samuel R. Heller, the same name that appeared on New Beginnings financial filings. She circled it in red ink. The broker. A knock startled her. 3 quick raps, then silence. She froze. "Who is it?" No answer. The second knock was slower. Clara snatched the files, stuffed them into a grocery bag, and slipped out the fire escape. Snow coated the metal rungs, her breath coming in sharp bursts. From the alley below, she saw a shadow at her door, a man in a coat, gloved hands, waiting. She didn't wait to see his face. By morning, she was at the precinct. Voss looked up from his desk as she entered, soaked and pale. "They came to my place," she said. He nodded grimly. "They're cleaning up loose ends." She set the bag on his desk. "Then let's make sure they miss one." He opened it, scanning the papers. "This is enough to get a warrant." "For who?" Voss looked at her. "For Heller." That afternoon, they went to New Beginnings. The office was quiet, blinds drawn. The secretary's desk was empty. A single lamp glowed behind the frosted glass of Heller's door. Voss pushed it open. The broker sat at his desk, calm as if he'd been waiting. The city's skyline shimmered behind him. "Detective," he said, smiling faintly. "You've come a long way." Voss held up his badge. "You're under investigation for trafficking and conspiracy." Heller folded his hands. "And you think you can prove that?" "I've got files, witnesses, transfers with your signature. Those papers, Hella said lightly. Copies. Forgeries, maybe. Hard to tell, really. And your witness, what was her name? Nurse Jeffries? She's already been suspended for misconduct. Hardly credible. Clara stepped forward. I saw what you did. Hella's gaze shifted to her, unblinking. You saw what you wanted to see. That's how conscience works. Voss took a step closer. This ends tonight. Hella smiled again, softly. Oh, detective. Nothing ends in this city. It just changes hands. An hour later, the warrant stalled. Judge unavailable. Files misplaced. By the time they returned with clearance, New Beginnings was empty. Desks cleared, computers gone, lights off. Voss stood in the doorway, jaw tight. They moved everything, he muttered. Clara looked around the empty office, then at him. Then we find where they went. Outside, across the street, a man in a dark Lincoln watched them from behind the wheel, speaking into a radio. Target confirmed, he said. Proceeding as instructed. The car eased into traffic, snow swirling in its wake. And high above, in a penthouse overlooking the lake, Samuel Heller poured himself a drink and watched the city lights flicker below. His city, his game, already setting the next move in motion. The snow eased by morning, leaving the city washed and quiet. Detective Voss hadn't slept. His desk was buried under files and cold coffee. Every lead he pulled seemed to unravel just when it mattered. Heller's people were scrubbing the trail faster than he could trace it. Ortiz dropped a folder on his desk. We got something off the financials. Shell accounts feeding money into Mercy Hill's renovation fund. Guess whose signature's on the checks? Voss flipped through the pages. Heller. Fronted through a foundation. The same one donating to half the city council. He sat back. That's how he's been untouchable. Ortiz nodded. And how he's staying one step ahead. Clara spent the morning in a coffee shop near Union Station, her hands still trembling whenever the door opened. She'd started noticing faces, people who seemed to look away too quickly, linger too long. Paranoia or pattern, she couldn't tell anymore. Her phone buzzed, a number she didn't know. A voice said, "You want proof? Meet me tonight. Warehouse 12, Canal Street." Midnight. Then silence. She stared at the phone for a long time before dialing Voss. They met that night in the parking lot, under a flickering street lamp. The warehouse loomed ahead, abandoned, windows blacked out. Snow crunched under their boots as they moved in. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and oil. Footsteps echoed in the dark. "Over here," a voice called. A man stepped from behind a stack of crates. Frank Daly. He looked thinner, eyes bloodshot. "I don't have much time," he said. "They're cleaning house. Heller's moving files out of state. Detroit, maybe further. He's got new hospitals lined up. Same scheme. You've got proof?" Voss asked. Daly nodded, holding up a tape recorder. "He called me after the raid. Thought I was still with him. I've got it all. Names, numbers, the orders." A noise cut through the silence. A metallic click. Voss spun. The far door swung open, and two men stepped in, guns raised. "Get down!" Voss shouted. The first shot shattered the darkness. Daly fell hard, the recorder clattering away. Clara dove behind a crate, heart hammering. Voss fired back, two flashes lighting the gloom. One man dropped. The other fled into the snow outside. When it was over, the warehouse was still again. Only the wind moaned through the rafters. Voss knelt beside Daly. "Hang on. You're gonna make it." Daly's breath rattled. He pressed the recorder into Voss's hand. "Get him, before they bury it again." Then his eyes went still. Outside, the sirens grew closer. Clara stood beside Voss, snow catching in her hair. "You think this will be enough?" she asked quietly. He looked at the recorder. "If what's on this is what I think it is, it might finally break the surface." They both knew how thin that hope was. Across the river, high in his office, Heller watched the city lights reflect in the glass, a faint smile tracing his face as he lifted his phone. "Proceed," he said. Before morning, somewhere in the dark, another van engine started. By dawn, the city felt uneasy, as if it knew something terrible was coming. Voss drove through streets slick with meltwater, the tape recorder sitting on the passenger seat like something alive. Every few minutes, he glanced at it, half afraid it might vanish like every other piece of evidence had. At the precinct, he and Ortiz transferred the audio to an evidence reel. The tape hissed and crackled, then a voice came through, unmistakably Heller's, calm, precise, unhurried. "The hospital board signs the release forms. We handle transport. Families pay through intermediaries, clean as church donations. No one asks where the children come from, and no one ever should." The room went silent. Ortiz leaned back slowly. "That's our case." Voss rubbed his eyes. "If the DA actually takes it, they will. We've got his voice, his signature, and a dead witness who tried to come clean." He didn't answer. They both knew how many cases like this had disappeared. Across town, Clara met with a reporter from the Tribune, a young man named Eddie Malone, barely 30, eyes bright with nerves. "You sure you want to go on record?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Someone has to." She gave him copies of the hospital records, the adoption lists, the photographs. He promised to get it to print by morning. But when she returned home that night, the lights in her apartment were already on. Inside, drawers open, papers gone. On the kitchen counter, a single Polaroid, her and Voss leaving the warehouse. No note, no sound, just the photograph and a glass of water beside it, still cold. That same night, Voss parked outside the courthouse, waiting for the DA to sign off on an arrest warrant. He watched the snow melt into slush on the steps. The city felt quieter than it should. His phone rang. "Ortiz. They pulled the plug," she said. "The judge says the tape's inadmissible. Chain of custody, technicalities. Doesn't matter." Heller's walking. Voss's hand clenched around the phone. "Who called it?" "Mayor's office." He said nothing. Ortiz sighed. "You should get out of town for a bit. They'll come for you next." He hung up. At midnight, the Tribune presses stopped without warning. Eddie Malone stood in the newsroom holding a half-printed proof, the ink still wet. Security guards moved through the aisles, collecting every copy. "Orders from upstairs," someone whispered. By morning, the paper ran a different story entirely. Mercy Hill cleared of allegations. Investigation finds no wrongdoing. Voss met Clara at dawn, in the park by the river. She looked pale, exhausted. "They took everything," she said. "The papers, the files, even my ID badge." He nodded slowly. "They took the truth too. What do we do now?" He looked at the river, grey and endless. "We keep it alive, even if it's just us." A siren wailed somewhere far off, a reminder that the city was awake again, pretending nothing had happened. And somewhere high above them, in a glass tower warmed by the morning sun, Samuel Heller signed another document. Different letterhead. Same signature. Same business. The spring thaw came early that year. The snow turned to dirty rivers that ran down the gutters and into the lake, carrying the winter's silence with it. The story of Mercy Hill had already faded from the news. No one spoke the names anymore. Not the mothers, not the babies, not even the sister now waiting for her court date in a holding cell where visitors never came. Detective Voss was transferred to the Property Crimes Division. Officially, it was reassignment. Unofficially, it was exile. He kept his desk small, his head down, but the case stayed open in his mind. The tape, the files, the faces. One night, after the others had gone home, he opened his drawer and took out the recorder. The original tape was gone, seized as evidence and lost, but he'd kept a copy. He pressed play, letting Heller's voice fill the empty room. Clean as church donations. He stopped the tape and stared out at the city through the blinds. It looked the same as it always had. Lights, smoke, distance. But now he could see the invisible seams holding it together, the hands that kept it running. Clara found work at a small community clinic on the west side. Fewer machines, fewer eyes. The work steadied her, even when the memories pressed in. Every so often she'd see a child, 3, maybe 4 years old, with that same look she remembered from the hospital nursery. Watchful, solemn, too old for their size. She wondered where they came from, if any of them carried Mercy Hill's ghosts. One afternoon, a woman came in with an adoption file for translation help. The agency name caught Clara's eye. Midwest Family Services. Same font. Same format. When she opened the file, her stomach turned. The signatory was Samuel R. Heller. The man had changed the name, not the game. She photocopied the document before returning it. That night, she called Voss. "I found him," she said. "He's started again." Voss didn't answer right away. "Then we start again too." He met her in the same diner as before. The coffee was still bad, the lights still harsh. She slid the photocopy across the table. "You know what this means," he said. She nodded. "That nothing we did mattered." He studied her for a moment, then folded the paper carefully. "It matters if we keep fighting." Outside, rain replaced snow. A newspaper drifted across the street, the headlines smudged. Above them, traffic lights blinked over empty intersections. Voss turned up his collar and said quietly, "They'll come for us again." "They already did," she said. "We're still here." He smiled at that, tired but real. As they left, a figure across the street lowered a camera. The shutter clicked once, then again. High above, in his new office overlooking the lake, Heller placed a photograph on his desk. 2 figures leaving a diner under a red neon sign. He set his glass down beside it. "Still chasing ghosts," he murmured. The city lights flickered in the window, and for a moment his reflection blurred with the skyline, power and distance untouchable. Then he turned back to his work, because for men like him, the business never ended. It just changed names. Summer came heavy that year, the kind of heat that pressed against the skin and made the streets hum. Chicago looked almost normal again, kids running through hydrants, traffic crawling along the expressway, the headlines full of elections and sports. The story of Mercy Hill was gone, forgotten by most, but not by all. Clara sat in a crowded community center basement, a stack of papers beside her, fans whirring above. Around her were women, mothers, nurses, social workers, passing photocopies, making notes, building something small but real. "Every case we find," she said, "we record. Every mother who lost a child, every name that vanished. we write it down. If they won't keep records, we will." There were nods around the table. It wasn't much, but it was something that couldn't be shredded. Detective Voss wasn't a detective anymore. He'd quit after one too many closed doors and missing files. These days, he worked out of a cramped office above a bail bonds shop, private investigations, low pay, long hours. But at night, when the streets went quiet, he still drove past the old Mercy Hill building. It was boarded up now, scheduled for demolition. He'd park across the street, watching the wind tear at the plywood, remembering the sirens, the lights, the faces that had passed through those doors. Sometimes he thought he could still hear the faint hum of hospital machinery, or the cry of a newborn echoing somewhere deep in the walls. One evening, Clara found him there. She stepped from her car and stood beside his, both of them staring at the dark shape of the hospital. "They're tearing it down next week," she said. He nodded. "Good. Doesn't erase what happened." "No," he said, "but it keeps them from hiding behind it." She handed him a manila folder. Inside were names, children traced through adoption agencies, found years later, scattered across states. A handful of them had birth records that matched the old Mercy Hill charts, proof enough to show the story wasn't over. "I'm sending them to every journalist who'll listen," she said. He smiled faintly. "Think they will? Maybe not now, but someday." They stood in silence, the building looming before them. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and something else, faint, sterile, almost like antiseptic. Voss said quietly, "You ever think about leaving this city?" She looked at him. "And go where this doesn't happen?" He didn't answer. A week later, the wrecking crews came. By noon, the roof was gone. By nightfall, only dust remained. The Mercy Hill sign fell last, shattering into pieces across the asphalt. From a distance, Clara watched with a small group of volunteers, each holding a folder. When the walls came down, they didn't cheer. They just stood, the sound of the machinery roaring against the weight of memory. Months later, a small article appeared in an independent paper. Grassroots group reopens investigation into 1980s hospital adoptions. No names, no photos, just a headline. But it was there, printed, permanent. In his office, Voss read it and smiled. The copy of the tape still sat in his drawer, waiting. In a downtown tower, Samuel Heller read the same article and smiled too, though for different reasons. "They never learn," he said softly, before turning back to his desk. That night, the city was quiet again. Streetlights shimmered on wet pavement. Somewhere, in a small apartment on the south side, Clara wrote another report, one name at a time. And far away, a child, one of the lost ones, slept in a house that would never know where they'd come from, only that someone, somewhere, still remembered. The city breathed. The truth slept light. And the story, though buried, was not gone. Some stories fade from the headlines, but not from the city's bones. Mercy Hill may be gone, yet the silence it left behind still breathes. If you want to uncover more buried truths like this, stay with us, subscribe, and keep the light burning with eternal Obsidian.